I've hiked more trails than I can count. Worked for the Forest Service up in Washington for nearly a decade. Seen bears, heard cougars scream in the night, watched lightning split trees in half during freak mountain storms. But nothing ever stuck with me, haunted me like what I found up near Cougar Rock that summer. It was supposed to be routine, a 4-day sweep to assess trail conditions and check up on an old fire watch tower that hadn't been visited in months. My partner had called out last minute with the flu, so I went alone. I wasn't worried. I had my radio, GPS, and years of experience under my belt. Day 1 was uneventful. The usual stretches of muddy switchbacks, downed trees, and black-tailed deer darting across the path. I camped near a creek, set up my tarp, boiled water, and fell asleep to the sound of wind in the pines. It was the second day, about halfway between Cougar Rock and the tower, that I saw something strange. A narrow footpath breaking off from the main trail, barely visible, half overgrown, no signage. I checked my GPS. Nothing. No indication that a path should be there. But the strangest part? It looked freshly walked, like someone had cleared it recently. There were broken branches, boot prints in the damp soil wide, heavy ones, and something else that stopped me cold. Nailed into a tree just beyond the mouth of the trail was a wooden plaque. It read, "Don't follow him." I stood there for a long time, just staring at that sign. Don't follow him. Not stay out, not private property, but a warning that sounded more like a plea or a curse. I should have turned around. I know that now. But curiosity gets under your skin in the woods. You convince yourself it's just an old joke, some forgotten hiker's prank. And besides, I'd been in these forests for years. I wasn't easily spooked, so I stepped off the trail. The air changed almost immediately. It was cooler, quieter, like the trees were leaning in. The path wound sharply, deeper and deeper, as if trying to pull me somewhere I wasn't meant to go. I stopped a few times, thinking I should turn back. But each time, I heard something faint ahead, just beyond the next turn, like soft footsteps. Not quite animal, not quite human. About 20 minutes in, I found the cabin. It looked ancient, the kind of structure you'd expect in a century-old photo. Moss-covered roof, collapsed porch, dark windows that swallowed light. No lock on the door. It creaked open with one push. Inside, the air was musty and stale. Dust floated like fog in the narrow beams of light breaking through the cracks in the walls. A broken chair lay tipped over by a fireplace. Old, moldy bedding in the corner. And on the wall, scratched into the wood in deep, deliberate gouges, was one word, repeated over and over. Mine. That was when the smell hit me. Rot. Damp. Something dead. I turned toward the back room, and for the first time since stepping off the main trail, I felt fear rising like a tide. The door to the room was ajar. I reached for my flashlight, and that's when I heard the breathing. Low, raspy, and coming from inside that room. And it wasn't alone. I stood frozen, flashlight trembling in my hand, listening to that slow, guttural breathing. It wasn't just one voice. There were 2, maybe 3 overlapping exhales, like an animal trying to imitate human lungs. My instincts screamed to run, but my body was locked in place. Slowly, I stepped back from the door, never taking my eyes off that pitch-black room. And then something inside moved. Just a subtle shift of weight on rotted floorboards enough to make the old cabin groan. I whispered, "Who's there?" No answer. Just another step closer this time. My light caught something for a split second. Not a face, not a body, just fingers. Pale, long, and bent at unnatural angles. They curled around the edge of the door, too many of them to belong to one person. I turned and ran. Out of the cabin, back down the overgrown path, crashing through brambles and brush like a wild animal. I didn't care how loud I was. I didn't care if I got lost. I just needed to get away from that thing or things in that cabin. But the forest didn't feel the same. Every direction looked wrong. The light was dimmer, like dusk had fallen early, and the trail that had led me here, it was gone, completely. My GPS had no signal. The compass spun in slow, erratic circles. I kept moving, pushing through the brush, heart hammering, lungs burning. Eventually, I found a clearing, a small meadow with dead grass and a single charred stump in the middle. On top of the stump was something that made my stomach turn, my name tag. Not dropped, placed. And next to it, carved into the wood, "You're his now." Behind me, I heard branches snapping fast, deliberate, and then I saw something step into the clearing. Not fully visible, a shape, cloaked in shadow, limbs too long, head tilting like it was studying me. It didn't run. It just stood there, watching, waiting. I didn't scream. I didn't even breathe. I just backed away slowly, never turning my back to that thing in the woods. It didn't follow Menet at first. It only watched. But somehow, that was worse. I felt like I'd been claimed, like it had already made up its mind, that I was no longer allowed to leave unless it said so. I don't remember the exact path I took out. My legs just kept moving, tearing through trees, stumbling over roots, hands scratched raw from grabbing branches to keep from falling. The forest felt infinite, like no matter how far I ran, I was still inside its ribs. I don't even know how long it took, hours maybe, but somehow I found the trailhead. I burst out of the woods like a man being born again, collapsed on the gravel, sobbing and shaking. A passing hiker found me, called for help. I spent the night in a hospital bed, hooked to fluids and monitors, while doctors tried to piece together what had happened. Dehydration, exhaustion, maybe a hallucination. That's what they said. But I know what I saw. I know what was in that cabin. When I returned with police the next day, the trail led to nothing. No cabin, no clearing, no stump. The forest was intact, untouched, as if it had swallowed everything whole again. But that night, back at home, I heard something at my window. Just a light tap. And when I looked, nothing. Except a smudge in the shape of a hand, too many fingers right there on the glass. I moved across the country a month later. I don't hike anymore. I don't even walk alone near trees. Because I know that thing didn't live in that forest. It lives in me now. And sometimes, when the night is quiet and the wind still, I swear I hear it breathing from inside the walls. I grew up in northern Idaho, where the forests aren't just trees and trails, they're endless walls of green that seem to breathe. My father was a fire lookout, stationed deep in the mountains during dry seasons. He'd take me with him sometimes when I was a kid, and those were some of my best memories, climbing the narrow staircase of the tower, watching storms roll across the horizon, hearing nothing but wind and distant thunder. When I was older, I followed in his footsteps. In 2019, I took an assignment for the summer, a remote tower near the Montana border, only accessible by ATV or a 3-day hike. They said it hadn't been used in years. That should have been a red flag. The first few weeks were uneventful. Mornings were filled with radio check-ins, logging temperature and wind data. Evenings were spent reading, cooking freeze-dried meals, and staring out at a view that stretched for miles. You start to feel untouchable up there, like you've stepped out of time. But then I started noticing things. At first, it was small. Items in the cabin would be out of place when I returned from my rounds. A can of beans moved from the shelf to the counter. A logbook flipped open to the wrong date. My cot blankets twisted like someone had slept in them. There was no one else out here. I was positive of that. Then one morning, I woke up to find muddy footprints on the stairs going up to the tower, and none going back down. I told myself it had to be an animal. Maybe a bear, though. None I'd heard of climbed 30 feet up a staircase and carefully stepped on each board without claw marks. But I let that logic soothe me, at least for the day. That night, I bolted the door and slept with my hatchet by the bed. Then came the whispers. At first, I thought it was static on the radio. Late at night, as I was logging Firewatch reports, I'd hear faint sounds between the crackles, like a voice too far away to make out. I tuned and retuned the dial, but it wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from outside. The tower was high, but sound travels differently out here. Sometimes it bends, sometimes it climbs, and sometimes it finds you. One night, I was brushing my teeth, standing by the window when I caught movement below. Someone or something was walking the perimeter. Slow, methodical. I killed the light and crouched down. In the dim moonlight, I could make out a figure too tall, too stiff in its gait, circling the base of the tower. It stopped, turned, and looked straight up. I swear I couldn't see its face. Just a long, featureless shape like a shadow stretched into something vaguely human. Then it whispered. I couldn't make out the words, but they weren't meant to be understood. They were meant to be felt. I backed away from the window, my heartbeat so loud it drowned out everything else. The next morning, I found the hatch to the trapdoor below my bed ajar. It had been locked. From the inside, I wanted to leave, but there was no quick way out, no roads. No one coming to pick me up until the scheduled extraction in 4 days. I radioed dispatch static, tried again, nothing but silence, and that same crackle I'd started to dread. It wasn't malfunctioning, it was being blocked. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat with my back to the wall, hatchet in hand, every window covered. Just after midnight, I heard the first creak of the staircase. Slow, heavy, one step, then another, then silence. I held my breath, counting in my head, waiting for the next footfall. Nothing. Then a tap 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 on the wall of the tower, like knuckles rapping against the boards. I bolted upright, scanned the room. Nothing outside the window. Then again. Tap tap tap. This time from a different wall. It was toying with me. I tried to stay calm, told myself it was the wind. Then came the unmistakable sound of boots on the metal landing just outside the door. My heart dropped. No one was supposed to be here. No one could be here. Then the doorknob turned. Slowly, deliberately. I stood frozen, hatchet raised, as the door shuddered not from a kick, but like someone pressing their full body against it. A long, low creak followed, as if the wood were straining not to give way. I screamed not words, just sound, and everything went quiet. Dead silent. I waited. 1 minute, 2. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. Nothing. But when I turned back into the room, the trapdoor below my bed was wide open again, and I could hear something breathing beneath me. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. I stood paralyzed as that soft, shallow breathing continued from beneath the floorboards. It wasn't hurried. It wasn't gasping. Just calm, measured, like it was waiting, watching. I stayed like that for hours, until the first gray light of dawn leaked through the window. Only then did the breathing stop. I finally summoned the courage to approach the trapdoor. It was still wide open. I leaned over with trembling hands, the hatchet clenched so tight in my fist my knuckles went numb. Below, I saw nothing, just blackness. A void that swallowed the flashlight beam whole, but I knew something had been there. I slammed the trap shut, barricaded it with everything I had, and sat in the corner rocking like a child. When my replacement finally arrived later that day, I didn't say a word, I just packed. He noticed my pale face, my wide eyes, and asked if I was okay. I handed him the key and told him, "Don't open the floor." I filed no report. I didn't tell the Rangers. Who would believe me? That night, back at home, I finally allowed myself to exhale, but I woke up just after midnight. My bedroom door was cracked open. I never leave it that way. And on the floor, just beneath my bed, I heard it again, soft, steady breathing, like it had followed me home. When I was a kid, I spent most of my summers with my grandparents in a small town surrounded by dense woods in northern Washington. There was this stretch of forest behind their house, dark, damp, and always unnaturally quiet. Everyone in town called it the Hollow. I wasn't allowed to go near it, and at first, I didn't care to. The way the trees bent inward, the way light seemed to vanish after the first few steps, it felt wrong. But one summer, around the time I turned 12, I started hearing things at night. Not animals or owls, people. Someone walking past my window in the gravel. Whispers that would stop the second I sat up. Then one night I saw him. It was just past 3 a.m. I had gone to the kitchen for water and looked out into the backyard. There was a man standing at the tree line, holding an old-fashioned lantern, not moving, just watching. His face was too far away to make out, but I knew, somehow, he was staring directly at me. I called out for my grandpa. When he came running, the man was gone, but there was a small set of footprints in the dirt bare feet. My grandpa looked pale, like he'd seen a ghost. He locked every door and told me, in the most serious voice I'd ever heard him use, "If you ever see him again, don't follow the light." For days after that night, I couldn't stop staring out the window. Every sound made me jump. Every creak in the hallway felt like a warning. My grandparents tried to act like everything was fine, but I could tell they were rattled. Grandpa added a second lock to the back door and put an old rifle by his recliner. He never spoke about that night again, but the way he looked toward the woods like they were alive told me enough. Then, about a week later, it happened again. I woke to soft light flickering through the blinds. My room faced the back, and when I peeked through, I saw the lantern again closer this time. The man was standing right in the backyard, still barefoot, still staring. But this time, something was different. He raised the lantern slowly, as if offering it to me. And when he did, I heard something faint. A whisper, not out loud, but inside my head, like it was echoing from the trees. "Come closer." I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. It was like the world around me had frozen. I just stood there, heart pounding, sweat beading on my forehead as the lantern flickered. Then, without warning, he turned and walked back into the wood slow and deliberated disappearing into the black. The next morning, I told my grandparents. My grandmother refused to talk about it. My grandfather just said, "It's starting again," and told me to pack a bag. He said we were going to stay with his brother on the coast for a few days. He didn't offer details. He just kept repeating, "He doesn't pick just anyone. And once he sees you, it's hard to make him forget." As we left, I looked back through the rear window of the car. The woods behind the house were still. But I swear, just for a second, I saw a faint light flickering between the trees like a distant lantern, waiting patiently for me to return. We stayed at my great-uncle's house for a full week. It was a small coastal town, quiet and windswept, miles from any forest. I started to relax. The nightmares faded. My grandfather seemed calmer, though he still slept with his boots on and a shotgun by the bed. One morning, I woke up to find him gone. He'd left a note on the table. "Just checking on things. Stay inside." I waited. Hours passed. No call. No return. By evening, I was pacing. My grandmother tried to distract me with old stories and puzzles, but her hands trembled with every piece. Finally, just before midnight, the phone rang. I jumped to answer, but it wasn't my grandfather. It was the sheriff's department. They found his truck abandoned on the side of the road, door open, keys still in the ignition. But no sign of him. Panic took over. My grandmother fell apart. I sat by the window all night, eyes wide open, afraid to blink. And then, I saw it again. A glow. Out past the dunes, near the tree line that bordered the edge of town, something was moving. A pale orange light bobbing through the tall grass. I ran outside. I don't know why. Maybe I thought he needed help. Maybe I thought I could finally end this. I chased the light for what felt like forever, cutting my hands on brambles and tripping over roots. The fog grew thick around me, turning the world into a wet, whispering tunnel. And then I saw him, the lantern man, standing just ahead between two blackened trees. But this time, he wasn't alone. My grandfather stood beside him, blank-faced, eyes distant, as if he couldn't see me. The man turned slowly, lantern flickering like a heartbeat. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't holding my grandfather there. My grandfather had followed him. He'd given in. The lantern man tilted his head, and the flame inside the lantern flared bright. I blinked just once, seen, they were gone. I don't remember getting back. My grandmother told me she found me on the porch at dawn, soaked to the bone and barefoot, staring at the trees. I didn't speak for 2 days. When I finally did, all I could say was, "He followed the light." The search lasted weeks. Dozens of volunteers, helicopters, dogs, nothing. Not a single footprint beyond where the truck had been found. It was like he just stepped into fog and vanished. My grandmother moved in with my parents not long after. She never spoke about that night. And I never returned to that coast. I've since read about others. People who vanish near forests, swamps, remote mountain trails. Some say it's exposure, others say they wandered, but a few mention the light, a strange glow in the trees, a figure just out of reach. I still see it, sometimes in dreams. The lantern flickering between dark trunks, the same slow tilt of the head, the same blank stare. And I know one day, when I'm older, when I'm tired, it might come for me too, not to hurt me, but to lead me home,